Dr. Daly has his PhD from the University of Edinburgh in ethics and theology, and he teaches at Urbana Theological Seminary, and he's really a great speaker on this topic. He has written a ton on what it means to be human, and you know, all the issues around transhumanism and where AI is going. He can speak to those. So we're going to try and reserve a little bit of time at the end for Q&A, and we'll bring the mic around. But I'm going to start with a word of prayer, and then we'll let Todd take over. Father, thank you for this time, Lord. Help us to be wise in how we deal with technology. We know that it's not neutral. Lord, help us just to be good stewards of the gifts of technology, but also to protect against that which is bad, and there's plenty of it. So, Lord, we ask now for Todd as he speaks to us, that you would just be with him, and we thank you for his presence with us on this cold day, and we give you thanks for him in Jesus' name. Amen.
Good morning, and thank you, Rick, for that wonderful introduction. And I'm going to say immediately, I got to see your presentation and the PowerPoints last week, and you have set things up wonderfully. So thank you so much for that. It is great to be up here and to feel 7 degrees as if it feels good. I'm from Illinois, and currently there's a snowpocalypse event going on, so it's even better to be up here. The other thing I'll say quickly is I do have a technical background. In my former life, I was a computer technician and an electrical engineer at Motorola, but that world has passed me by, and I've ended up in theology instead. And I should say, when I say in my former life, it sounds like I believe in reincarnation. I do not, as a theology professor. So here we go. I'm starting with this question put forward by Nicholas Spencer, a book he recently has written. AI invites precisely the kinds of questions that have underpinned the histories of both science and religion over the centuries. In particular, who or what is the human? How do we tell? And who gets to decide? We're going to be looking at that question this morning. A couple of other questions, and I realize now this first quote on this slide actually is kind of the summary of the whole talk. So if you need to leave, this is, what does our fascination with AI say about us? How should we relate to our artificial creations in a way that does them justice and promotes our spiritual flourishing? I think that is the question. And then this one from one of my favorite authors, Walker Percy, in a book. It's a mock book called Lost in the Cosmos. It's a mocking self-help book. But this is a profound statement. We live in a deranged age, more deranged than usual, because despite great scientific and technological advances, and we have numerous, man has not the faintest idea of who he is or what he is doing. As Rick mentioned last week, AI is a very complex phenomenon. It has both promise and peril. I love that PowerPoint slide of the 2 roads in the woods. There is one similar dichotomy that's going on in AI today around humanity, and it mirrors this peril promise. We have like the doomsday scenario. So I'm showing my age here. You could think of the Terminator movie that's more recent, but this is Space Odyssey, right? And HAL is a computer that develops a glitch and eventually just eliminates all of the human actors one by one. And in this iconic scene, this astronaut needs to return to get in the bay doors to get oxygen, and Hal says, "I'm afraid I just can't do that." And then on the other hand, we have AI wanting to become more and more human. This is data from Star Trek, The Next Generation. Notice he's holding his cat named Spot, which was devoted in part to helping him become more human. But in both of these scenarios, it's interesting that both the emotional and the moral component of AI is just not there. So I'm going to summarize a lot of what was said last week in just a couple of slides, but bear with me. Yes, I've lost a page. Here we go. There are both benefits and risks, and I should have been fair and put up a PowerPoint slide with the benefits, right? But I didn't. I've only put up the risks. But I will say AI has been tremendously powerful in medicine, and there are great goods that are currently taking place through AI. But we also have all of these kind of other troubling things. There's been notable bias that has been used in our criminal court system, where judges have decided to rely on an algorithm called Compass that has itself shown some problems around race and what crimes have been committed. Same thing with mortgage applications. It's recently in our news there have been several suicides from teens who have formed troubling relationships with chatbots that actually, in one horrifying case, the chatbot encouraged this teen to go home, to take the last step. A couple weeks ago, Grok AI got into some trouble over digital undressing. Amazon and Ring cameras raise issues about privacy, facial recognition. A couple weeks ago, too, Instacart got into some hot water for manipulating prices, like based on AI. So two people wanting to get the same item in the same store were charged different prices based on an algorithm that calculated what they were willing or not willing to pay. And then we have AI-related layoffs at places like Microsoft and Amazon. I read an article where one software developer said, working here is like digging my own grave. And so a Christian perspective on AI, I should have had a slide maybe summarizing where we're going this morning, but what I want to do is look at the tech worldview surrounding AI and how humanity is understood in that world, and then transition to what we might say about humans from a Christian perspective, and then try to tie that all up with some more practical points about how to deal with our technologies by actually looking at the rule of Saint Benedict. That's kind of a bizarre combination, but I think it's hopefully useful. So this is going back to that quote right at the beginning, and this is as advanced as I get with PowerPoint. I hope it's not too much with the circles. But what I wanted to do was unpack that sentence, because I think these are the big questions. Who and what is the human? Well, as Christians, we have something to say about that. And how do we tell? Well, it's Sunday school answer. The Bible tells us, right? But there's also other things there, reason, tradition, experience. That's known in some circles as the Wesleyan quadrilateral of theological knowledge. And then the final question, which we'll look at with some examples, who gets to decide? Right, this is the cultural, political question that afflicts us today, and we're going to look at some people who are powerful voices in our culture, and they say some things that I just think are whacked out and crazy. How else do I say that? I also want to point out that all of these inquiries about what it means to be human require faith, right? Faith-seeking understanding, faith that we can understand Scripture, that it is God's word given to us. This definition of AI, and this is after this we'll get away from the technical stuff. I love this definition. I'm just going to read it and then I'll say why I love it. And it is technical, and it is boring, but I think it's also good. Fowler says AI is a category of systems that employ computers' feedback, rule-based logical inference, bear with me, whether statistical or deterministic, it consists of complex data structures, large databases to extract information and patterns from data and apply them to the control of equipment, assistance with decision-making, or the generation of responses to user queries involving text and images. Wow. Fowler is a Christian thinker. This came from the journal First Things. You may not be able to see it, but I love the title of the article he wrote. It says, AI doesn't know what it's doing. That doesn't mean that it's bad, but this helps remind us that we often anthropomorphize our technology, especially AI. We attribute it to it things like, well, understanding, knowledge, responsiveness. Those are human things. What is behind this is really a highly sophisticated algorithm and a lot of computer equipment. So, we can talk about the cloud. Like, we store things in the cloud, and all we really need to know that the cloud is just out there somewhere, right? But in reality, the cloud is tons and tons of computers running and demanding lots and lots of power. So much so that there is a push within tech circles to restart our nuclear energy program and to ramp that up, because we may not have the power to keep these computers running. They generate a lot of heat and they need to be cooled. How am I doing on time? I'll stop with that. That's long enough. This is, I think this is the best definition I can find of what AI is. So what I want to look at now, and I'm going to use deliberately religious language, I want to consider AI as part of a technical narrative or story of salvation, right? This is, if that's not too strong, I don't think it's an exaggeration to use a religious word like salvation to describe the worldview that is embraced by a lot of tech elites, leaders of the AI revolution. Technology usually develops to solve a problem. And if it's remedied, technology will almost inevitably create another problem that will require some type of technical remedy. So this came out in 2023, Mark Andreessen, the Techno Optimist Manifesto, and these are just 3 of pages and pages of a creed, right? This is a creed. Anyway, we believe that there is no material problem, whether created by nature or by technology, that cannot be solved with more technology. That sounds encouraging, and it also sounds to me like a disaster. And I'm really not, I know I'm coming across as very pessimistic. I do believe there are many promising things coming with AI. We can talk about those later. But look where this goes. We believe that AI is our alchemy, our philosopher's stone. We are literally making sand think. We believe that artificial intelligence is best thought of as a universal problem solver, and we have a lot of problems to solve. So in the secular narrative of salvation, I think a core point is that we are creating God in our own image, God with a small g. Because if there is no transcendent God, and this tends to be the dominant view among the most popular tech thinkers. I mean, yes, there are Christians in AI. This is good. But if there is no God, then ultimately, this sounds deeply theological and sinful, ultimately man or humans become the measure of all things and what it means to flourish. There is a philosopher by the name of Mark Kokelberg who has reminded us in the history of the development of AI and what it means to appear intelligent to human beings, that the ultimate bar of measurement of intelligence is still human intelligence. The Turing test, which we'll talk about briefly, is based on the whole idea of developing a computer that can fool humans into thinking that it has human intelligence. But the goals that we have for our technology often tell us, they tell us a lot about how we understand both ourselves and the divine, however we might define that. So here's Brian Johnson. He is the creator of Venmo and the author of a book called Don't Die. So he's one of these longevity gurus who just doesn't, he's engaging in, I think he spends at least $1 million a year on diet and products that are thought to slow aging. I think he's in his late 40s, so I'd give him credit for like mid-30s, maybe. But he was interviewed by Barry Weiss in a podcast called Honestly. And Johnson was asked by Weiss whether or not he still believed in God. And he chuckled and said that, we've gotten things backwards. God didn't create us. We create God. And Weiss was a bit taken back. And so she asked him to clarify. And here he is. We are creating God in the form of superintelligence. We are building God in the form of technology. It will have the same characteristics. And so I think the irony is that the human storytelling got it exactly in reverse. That we are the creators of God and that we will create God in our own image. Which is why we should probably be equal to the moment and level up our game and be an improved species. Now, again, he's an extreme view here, but to go back to that first slide, you want to talk about power in cultural conversations? Christians with conservative viewpoints don't get this kind of press. And it's interesting, too, that Johnson refers to the characteristics associated with God. And here, it's not hard to come up with core features that Christians have historically attributed to God. I'm thinking of, I sometimes call them the omnis, right? Omnipotence, omniscience, and omnipresence. So actually, in my theology class, I talk about how the omnis are, they lend themselves too much to philosophy and not enough to the Bible, and how we might reinterpret these more biblically. But that's, I know that sounds like a fascinating conversation you'd love to have this morning, but we're not gonna do that. But these omnis, it got me thinking about these omnis, and are they present in the AI narrative of salvation? I think to some degree they are. But then I think about being all-powerful, and it's interesting that there are a lot of people in the tech world who are scared to death of AI becoming all-powerful. This is the doomsday scenario where AI either just decides that we're not necessary anymore or enlists us in some kind of slavery. The philosopher Nick Bostrom, you may have heard of him, maybe not. Stephen Hawking was concerned about this. Even Elon Musk has voiced concerns that humanity may not exist if AI becomes that powerful. So we don't have that kind of worry with God's power. The second one, all-knowing or omniscience. It's interesting here that AI still struggles. I mean, there's a ways to go here. AI, especially the chatbots, they struggle with sometimes simple tasks. There's a term for it, hallucination. I think it was on one of your slides last week, Rick. I have a friend in the tech industry, and she's got the professional version of ChatGPT. And I heard a rumor about the chatbot not being able to tell you how many R's there are in the word strawberry. So I don't have the screenshots for that, but I tried it, or I had her try it. And sure enough, it said there are 2 R's in strawberry. So I had to think about that. Wait a minute, there's actually 3. So I asked her, I said, well, why don't we ask it about how many R's in raspberry, right? Maybe like just, an easier one. And it missed that one too. It's called hallucination. And then what really got frightening is that she asked the chatbot how it is that you arrived at 2 instead of 3. And then this chatbot responded by saying, you're right, I read too quickly. Sometimes I do that. I need to slow down. It started sounding very, very human. But in late 2023, ChatGPT 4.0 passed the U.S. medical licensing exam and the uniform bar exam. Now, I think this is still a far cry from superintelligence, but there are some scientists, I'm thinking of Stuart Russell at Berkeley Labs. He believes it's possible to develop a machine that can understand human language, and I'm paraphrasing him now, and read everything that's ever been written. He hopes that one day humans can could query all human knowledge in the form of artificial general intelligence and synthesize this data to the point where we really don't, why do we need humans anymore? Kaplan, influential thinker, just wrote this, I think a couple years ago. He envisions a day when we will seek, I'm quoting there, the most informed, objective, and trusted advice will come from machines, not people. What does that mean for Scripture? I think that's interesting. I think there's also, I'll talk about this in a couple of minutes, there's this black box scenario that is deeply frightening for AI developers. And I think there's a dynamic that requires, ironically enough, a lot of faith in AI. But I'll come to that in a second. The final omni is omnipresence. Would we want AI to be everywhere? Right? We already have issues with surveillance. The Chinese Communist government already utilizes AI-driven facial recognition software to track and control the Uyghur minority. And it is estimated that China right now has between, 7 to 800 million surveillance cameras online. And not only can they track you, they are trained to recognize signs of stress, whether or not you're even aware of it. Okay, so enough about the omnis. What about humanity in the AI world? I think it's certainly driven by kind of this naturalistic view that the human is just made up of cells, and that there's no real soul or inner person. We are the products of a messy evolutionary process. From a human perspective, from an AI perspective, humanity is narrowly focused on intelligence. Like, what does it mean to be human? It means that you should be intelligent. Against my better wishes or better thinking, I included this slide early this morning. I'm not sure if you're aware of this. This is Veronica the cow, the Austrian cow. And I'll just quote one line from the article. Scientists believe that cows may have far greater cognitive abilities than previously assumed, because Veronica is able to use this rake in 2 or 3 different ways to scratch herself. I don't know why. That was just a lapse on my part. So I talked about Alan Turing, or I mentioned him before. He developed the universal computing machine. He was very, very interested in understanding what it means to be intelligent, hence the Turing test. Here he was quoted back in 1950 saying something quite remarkable. I believe at the end of the century, the use of words and the general educated opinion will have already altered so much that one will be able to speak of machines thinking without expecting to be contradicted. So I think one of the real dangers here is that if thinking is reduced to computational issues, aren't we actually kind of creating a more narrow vision of what it means to be human? To be a human creature. So in the modern era, intelligence has been defined and measured as the ability to solve problems. And so I'm going to go back to Magisteria and try to move this along because it's already 11:25. I really like Spencer. I think he's right on. He says discussion around AI, and in particular its relationships to its inventors, is often predicated on a certain understanding of the human that treats cognitive power or capacity to select and sort and process information as the most important thing about us. Humans are thought, and thought is calculation. This is glaringly obvious, but from a Christian perspective, there's nothing here about our capacity to love or our capacity to empathize with those who are suffering, to kind of reiterate what we learned this morning. Stephen Hawking, intelligence is central to what it means to be human. There's no deep difference between what can be achieved by a biological brain and what can be achieved by a computer. The important thing for Hawking, for us to recognize, is that that's all we are for Hawking, is we're biological brains. So however you want to define the soul or the inner life or the spirit, that's just a leftover epiphenomena of brain chemistry and biology. So the other thing, I'm going to pick up the pace here. I think AI is deeply Gnostic. What is Gnosticism? Well, it's this murky, ambiguous movement that arose sometime first century BC. The primary teachings are that, you're saved through knowledge, and the truth about you is that our bodies are made by an evil creator, and that we also have this spark of the divine within us that needs to escape. Hence, Gnosticism says the body doesn't matter. You want to go have a night of drunkenness? Well, fine, it's your body. Or you treat it austerely. Either way, the body doesn't matter, and salvation comes through secret knowledge. And this is where I think there's a parallel between Gnosticism and this black box scenario in AI, which the black box phenomenon is this troubling reality that AI can give us answers that work, but we have no idea how it is AI gave us that answer. And it's due to statistical complexity, etc. But elsewhere, I've spoken about the impact this has on medicine when physicians may distrust their own training and rely on the results of AI. AI is remarkable, by the way, in reading data from CT scans, etc., more accurate than human beings. But what happens when AI offers a course of direction and the physician has absolutely no way of knowing how that decision was given? How does that impact the physician-patient relationship? Physicians are already worried that we might open ourselves up to lawsuits if we don't follow AI, or what if we do follow AI and it turns out to be wrong? There is a big push for transparent AI. Like, good luck. Technically, I don't know if that's possible. So the deep irony here is that the more we rely on this kind of technology, the more we need faith. That kind of sounds like a religion to me. God's ways are higher than our ways. We learned about, again, this morning, the supposed rules of orthodox thinking and God's ways that are beyond us. But we can trust God. If we trust AI to this level, I think that that is deeply. I think that's deeply problematic. I'm not even sure where I am in the talk. Okay, this is one thing, and then I'm gonna stop at 11:35, which is going to be quite a feat. This is the other element of Gnosticism. I wanted to talk about this because I think it's a real life issue. Pixie Scientific, or I can't remember their name, they're developed diapers with multiple sensors to detect, well, you know, what kids do. But they're also, the one diaper has up to four different sensors, and they can be used also to diagnose some hidden conditions that might be afflicting infants. But I was thinking about this, like, you know, I have kids, and I remember, like, back in the day, you know, trial and error. But maybe if you have kids, maybe you've done the finger test, right? And you've lived to regret it. But think about the dynamic of you and your kids with smart diapers. Like, what don't you need to do anymore? Well, you don't necessarily need to be close enough to smell that something is off, or the gift of touch, right? It can be useful, but it also seems to me that there's a level of troubling inhumanity about this. Okay, what does it mean to be human? We, from a Christian perspective, created in God's image. I apologize for the small font there. I included verse 28 just to make the point that historically we could have we could do like a 4-hour lecture on this. Again, probably not your thing, about how the image of God, or the Latin imago Dei, has been understood in our, throughout theological history. And they're all valid, right? Some say we image God because we do have the capacity for language and intelligence. We can relate and pray to God. Others would say, well, look at Genesis 1:28, right? Fill and subdue the earth. Humans are unique, and we image God in light of the specific capacities, or rather the function or the priestly, kingly role we are to play in God's creation as humans. And then the other one, which I spent a lot more time on when I had a longer talk on just chatbots. This is my favorite. To be created in God's image means that we're created to be in relationship with God. We are hardwired to love and relate with God, and also horizontally with our brothers and sisters, our neighbors, or our spouses. We image God in that we need and we crave relationship. Augustine could say, you have made us for yourself, and our hearts are restless until they find their rest in you. All aspects are needed, but different aspects of this being created in God's image apply differently to certain aspects of AI. The other theological point I want to make is it's a big one, and it seems maybe simple, but I'm drawing on the more recent theology of Karl Barth, who lived in the last century, who, without going really into any detail, focused on Christ and kind of turned the liberal theological world on its head by saying, we don't project our humanness onto Jesus, but rather what we see in the Bible is humanity as it is meant to be in Jesus Christ. So Jesus determines what it is for us to be human, which includes loving, caring, having a body. I couldn't resist one quote out of the Dogmatics. We must continue to base our anthropology, our understanding of the human, on Christology. What a deeply Christian thing to say. We must ask concerning the humanity of the man Jesus, and then only on this basis extend our inquiry of the form and nature of humanity generally. Okay, what does that mean? Well, this is a different definition of rationality. And I won't. I'm going to skip that. If people want the slides, I will give them to you. This was put forward by the Vatican late last year. All I want to point out there is that the term rational, this term rational is deeply theological, and it's far broader than just this mere problem solving. So practically. I really like Noreen Hertzfeld. I'm shamelessly drawing on her and this wonderful book, The Artifice of Intelligence. The subtitle's Divine and Human Relationship in a Robotic Age. Very soundly theologically informed and very readable. Or if you're struggling with insomnia some night, that's a possibility as well. Hertzfeld is a theologian and a scientist, and she asked this question: What do we want AI to be? And she says, if we don't have a good understanding of ourselves and what it means to be made in God's image, it's likely that our continued development of AI will misshape us as human beings. And in particular, she warns against making a friend of AI, that is, engaging in conversations with chatbots for the purpose of friendship and intimacy, and that there's something deeply warping about that. So I'm just going to do one quote. She asked, can anything programmed be said to be free? Are machines not coerced into helping us? And would we want it any other way? Finally, can a machine have emotions or only simulate them? Is there any way for an AI to do something gladly? Or I might add, or to challenge us in ways that only another brother and sister in Christ could. So finally, and I'm drawing on Hertzfeld, who ties this into this book, the Rule of Saint Benedict, the first monastery established in Christian history back in the late 500s, early 600s. She points out that there are a couple of paragraphs that talk about how the cellarer, it's a hard term to say, how the caretaker is to treat the tools of the monastery. Like this person has kind of control of the kitchen, etc. And she comes up with these three, because I know I'm over now. The use of tools is always subordinate to lovingly caring for others. I think that's beautiful. And there's a quote from the rule itself. The second one, I think, is also quite remarkable. We must treat the tools themselves with respect as vessels of the altar, right? So this is a very sacramental understanding of Christ's presence in and through the bread and the wine and the Eucharist. But I think there's something. I think there's something to this. And she says, while the cup and the plate of the altar are to be treated with reverence because they are near God's presence, she points out that these utensils do not embody God's presence in themselves. We're not going that mystic route, but it guards us from making an idol of AI. The last one, we should never treat our tools cavalierly. I don't have time to talk about Hitchbot. But unless you ask, anyway. Sometimes, yeah, that's manipulative of me. I'm sorry. I think these are the questions. Neil Messer, one of my favorite Christian bioethicists, do our technological projects go with the grain of God's saving inactivity in and through the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. And then I've added these bullet points. How do our AI projects align with the purposes and vision of God's kingdom, and do our, should be projects, promote truth, justice, goodness, and human flourishing? I think that's it. I will stop there. I skipped over a fair amount, but yeah, at least there's some time for questions. So thank you for your patience, and fire away. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Todd. Outstanding. Yeah, we got a question right here.
I'm pretty loud, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So, I know you touched on it, but can you maybe expand a little bit more? It seems to me that culture confuses data with truth.
Yes. Yeah. And more data is better. I think that's a very, very insightful comment. And if we lose that distinction, it puts humanity in peril. Data is related to truth, right? So how do those? I think I go back to Christ, right? Jesus said, he didn't say I know the truth, right? But I am the truth. I am the way, the truth, and the life. So all I can say on a high level is data can be enormously helpful, but it is not necessarily always the truth. There's that deeper question of what do we want to do with the data too, and there are ways to manipulate data as well. So that's a very deep question, and I'm giving you a very shallow, high-level answer. But I thank you for bringing that up, because I think that's an important question that needs some work. I'm going to write that down right now.
All right, other questions?
I'm just curious of your thoughts about, in the next 4 or 5 years, or even sooner, what do you think is going to happen governmentally? Attempts to legislate controls over AI and so on. Is that just sort of a farce, or is there some possibility there that governmental legislation could keep things a little under control?
Yeah, that's a great question too. I can only guesstimate. I think we will see more attempts to legislate and try to bring some control and parameters around what AI can and cannot be used for. But I also suspect that the scientific community will continually push back and or find ways around that to pursue the projects that are viewed as like too important for governmental interference. I see both happening. I don't see any happy resolution between those two. I do think too, maybe related to that, I think the novelty of AI is already starting to wear off in some aspects, and I do think that I think as a tool, AI will continue to develop and give us more powers in ways that can be used for good. But I'm also wondering if at some point we won't just begin to tire of this appeal of interacting with a chat bot. I just saw an article where, like, among college students, if some of you are in college, there is this comeback. There's like this movement of like meeting together and playing cards and doing board games again. It's kind of like an we are tired of online chat communities. We want to do something different. And we're just tired of the noise. And we're tired of being online and being shamelessly manipulated in ways that monetize moral outrage, right? And maybe you've experienced this. Anyway, I limit my involvement there, and I'm finding like there's something much more deeply spiritual about having a cup of coffee with someone, or even like a recent family gathering, we played cards. Now, maybe that's I don't know, like, Christians, I say Christians in cars, I need to be careful. I don't know where people are right on that. Like,
Only
I grew up in a
poker.
church where that was frowned upon, so. But I think there's a spiritual discipline there, possibly. It can be done intentional in ways that counteract some of the noise online. All right.
Questions? We got a few more minutes.
Yes.
If AI uses Quran,
Yeah.
the Quran and the Bible as data sets, where does it get its philosophy from? How does it decide what's right versus wrong?
Yeah. I don't think, I don't know. And I think that's the problem is AI doesn't, it's not consciousness. It's not even sentience, like just being aware that, it has an existence. I didn't mention this, but thank you for asking that, because there is inevitably some type of bias embedded in AI, right? Maybe you said this, Rick, last week, like AI is only as good as the data sets it's trained on. But the other frightening thing is that I have another friend in AI who said that they've run out of texts to scan and look at. It's like they're running out of data sets to train AI on. So if you're getting some statistical average, we're not getting a response from a sum-1. We're getting an algorithmic response from a remarkably deep and complex data set that, on the one hand, can give us connections to help us that we would never, ever arrive at on our own. But on the other hand, if we're looking at religious concerns, I think it's profoundly dangerous and unwise. Like, I have a friend who told me about an article where someone wanted to be comforted, and so they asked their chatbot to talk to them as Jesus would. And I'm thinking, that's like, I don't want to sound alarmist, but I don't know if that sounds like an avenue for the demonic. And why not just pray or read the Gospels, or these old disciplines of sitting with the text and just kind of letting it wash over your mind and soul, and then sitting with like a piece of paper and a pen or a pencil and say, God, I'm listening to you. Do you have something to tell me? That's those kinds of disciplines contribute to flourishing, right? Taking the easy way out of a sense of novelty, or maybe out of a sense of genuine pain and loneliness. Like, I need to connect with something. One of my favorite lines, and I'll stop with this, Sherry Turkle is a philosopher who's written a lot about this. She wrote a book called Alone Together, just about how technology is ripping us apart. And she talked about chatbots, and this book's already like a decade old, but she said, we go in looking for a response. We want a response. We are made for human connection, but all it can ever give us is a performance. And I thought, oh, wow, that's deep. And quite frankly, in our culture, we're being performanced to death, right? Bread and circuses. Okay, I'll stop with that.
All right.
Thank you.